Pandora Syndrome. Written by April Walleen. Read by April Walleen. Directed and recorded by Andreas Gallego. One of the nice things about North Hollywood was that there were a lot of little grocery stores to choose from. So, one night, when Hank discovered that what little food he had at the house was growing mold, we all decided to take a trip to the store. I was a little peckish myself, and Jack could always use more frozen steaks. I managed to lose Hank and Jack halfway through the store and made my way towards the back, on the pretense of looking for the bathroom. Once in the storage room, I used my handy vamp stealth to find a place to stalk my prey. Padding along silently, I made no more noise than a spider across its web. I stalked a short Hispanic stock boy to the back of the storage area. I stood behind him, scenting the tinge of his blood, when he finally noticed my presence. He turned in surprise, but then smiled broadly. I was wearing jeans and a Ninja Turtles t-shirt, but the stock boy looked at me like I was wearing the slinkiest thing he'd ever seen. "Can I help you?" he asked, his eyes glittering at me in excitement. "Yes, you can," I smiled, and slowly closed the distance between us. In moments, I had my lips to his neck, and warm, slightly spicy blood flowed into my mouth. I was just about done feeding when I heard a startled voice behind me. "Dora?" I immediately withdrew my fangs and turned. There was Hank, staring at me wide-eyed. Damn, I should have heard him coming a mile away. Just then, Hank's hand shot out, striking me in the neck. My body stiffened with a strange electric current, and I was frozen in place. Oh, crap. What was happening? Hank stood looking down at his hands with wide eyes. Holy crap, it worked! I tried to respond, but my mouth wouldn't move. Neither would my vocal cords. Internally, I began to panic. What did Hank hit me with? Why'd he hit me in the first place? I was trying to think of some way out of this situation when Hank began walking away. Weirdly enough, I moved with him, like I was floating, being pulled along by some invisible tether. Hank walked along quickly, looking this way and that to make sure we weren't being followed. He made his way to the back door of the store and out towards the dumpsters. I groaned inwardly. I may not have been able to move, but my sense of smell was working just fine. The stench of expired vegetables and rotted meat was making me want to gag. Hank winced, attempting to wave the smell away. Glad to see I wasn't the only one affected. Once he got used to it, though, he paced before me with a wild sort of look in his eye. I struggled again, trying each one of my vampiric abilities to free myself. Unfortunately, they were no use at the moment. Just to be sure, I tapped into my sense of death. Aside from a lot of dead bugs and the occasional rat, there wasn't much I could use to defend myself. Then I noticed that strange feeling of being watched I got every so often. Instantly, my attention shifted from my manic roommate to the off sensation. I concentrated and tried to pinpoint it, and somewhere far away I connected. Fierce, dark brown eyes glared in my mind's eye, and I flinched. I heard an odd chuckle then, and the feeling grew. It had to be the necromancer. He was coming closer, and he knew I was vulnerable. I focused back on Hank, trying to make my mouth work, to tell him that he had to let me go. Horror was coming our way, and I wasn't going to be able to stop it. I struggled and fought, but Hank just paced all the more, muttering to himself like he was working up to some grand speech. At this point, I didn't care what he was doing. I was worried about the deathly presence creeping along the shadows, growing ever closer. I needed help. I could reach for Remy, but he was out on some political trip to the north. Jack came to mind, and I instantly felt him in the grocery store. He turned on a dime and headed to the back of the store towards us. As Jack came close, I felt the presence slow, hesitating. It could feel him too, and while that fact frightened me, I didn't want Jack in any kind of danger. He seemed to scare off the dark presence. Hank just continued pacing nervously before me. Oh God, what was he gonna do? I half expected him to pull a stake out of his jacket and plunge it through my heart. When he reached into his inner pocket, I tensed. However, instead of a stake, he pulled out a weird flat little rock. "Dora, what are you doing out here?" Jack asked as he came out the back door after me. He stopped when he saw the strange scene before him. Hank held the stone out as if it would protect him against Jack. "Stay back. I don't want to hurt you, Jack," Hank told him shakily. "This is between me and the vampire." "Hank?" Jack asked in confusion. "What the hell are you doing to my sister?" "I trapped her in an electric field. After I caught her attacking the stock boy, Hank replied. I would have protested if I could, but luckily Jack came to my defense. Hank, he said calmly, just let Dora go. She was only feeding. She wasn't going to hurt him. You don't call sucking his blood hurting him? Jack thought a moment. Okay, you have a point. But she wasn't going to kill him if that's what you were thinking. Well, yeah. I didn't think she was going to kill him, but vampires can severely hurt someone. Jack looked at him sideways. So you know about vampires then? I mean, I've never really interacted with one before, but I know about them, yeah. I know about a lot of supernatural creatures, he said, still holding the little stone out at Jack like a weapon. Hank, she's not a killer, so just put down whatever that is. Let Dora go, and we can talk about this. Hank stayed still a moment, clearly thinking about it. You're sure she wasn't hurting that guy? The Hispanic guy? Yeah, I passed him on the way out here. He's loading boxes if you want to go check. Hank straightened and lowered his arm, placing the rock back in his pocket. Oh, well, sorry. I guess I kind of panicked. Never seen a vampire feed before. Thought I was helping that guy. It's all right, Jack replied. Now, can you let Dora down? Hank looked up at me nervously. Is she gonna hurt me? I promise that she won't hurt you, Jack replied. Now just let her free, or whatever. Hank nodded and reached into his pocket, pulling out a little yellow jewel. He placed it in the palm of his hand and passed his other hand over it in a circular motion. My muscles began to unclench, and slowly my body was released. I straightened up, shook off the strange static feeling running over my flesh, and pounced. With a surprised squeal, Hank hit the cement, and I glared down at him. Jack said he wouldn't hurt me, Hank cried in panic. I hissed at him, watching as he squealed beneath me. Roommate meeting, I said through gritted teeth, and then got up, moving as fast as I could, just to further scare the crap out of him. I was rewarded with another little shriek. Jack helped Hank up, and I rushed off towards the house. I was not a happy vampire. When Jack and Hank finally reached the house, we settled tensely in the living room. I paced before them as they sat on the couch watching me. I was so mad I didn't even know where to begin. Sarge sat by my side, growling at Hank. He normally liked Hank, but Sarge knew I was mad at him and was acting accordingly. Look, Hank spoke up, breaking the silence. I'm sorry, but I thought you were going to kill that guy. Well, you thought wrong, I spat back, trying to contain the low, threatening hiss in my voice. Sarge growled in unison. I looked over at Jack just to see how he was reacting. Unlike Sarge, Jack only sat looking neutrally concerned. I was just a little stunned to see a vampire feeding firsthand. I've known about supernatural creatures since I was a toddler, but my experience with them is just a bit lacking. No shit, I hissed back. Sarge barked. Come on, Dora, let him speak, Jack defended. I glared at him, briefly thought about making him dead for this conversation, and then decided against it. Having a neutral party in this was probably a good thing. Look, I guess what you were a while ago, Hank continued, motioning to me. Your little hiss fest the day I accidentally woke you up was a pretty big giveaway. My cousin and his family are mages, he told us then. I'd seen a few mage hunters about and caught the random scent of magic when I passed supernaturals around town, but other than that, I only knew what I'd seen in movies. Basically, I thought mages should look like Gandalf or Harry Potter. It was then that the strangeness of the situation hit me. My anger subsided, and the panic began. My eyes narrowed at Hank in suspicion. Sarge whimpered. Jack, I called to my brother. I need to talk to you. In private. Jack glared at me. No, Hank is our roommate. If we want this to work, we need to get this all out in the open. I'm not going to be your go-between. I glared right back at my brother. He was in producer mode now and thought he could fix everything with a friendly chat. I wasn't so sure. That's the way you want this? I asked him. Jack just folded his arms stubbornly. Fine then, I stood and pointed at Hank. Don't you think it's just a bit suspicious that the one person you invited to move in with us knows about supernaturals? He has a mage cousin and weird little vampire capturing electric stones? Jack sat thinking on that a moment. Well, yeah, that is a weird coincidence, but there are lots of supernaturals around. I'm sure there are plenty of humans that know about them. Rosetta knew. So did Mom. Hank nodded, but I just glared at him. Don't you think you're being just a bit paranoid? Paranoid? I asked, and Sarge woofed in emphasis. Need I remind you, big brother, of the plot that caused our deaths? I thought of the dark presence I'd felt earlier and shuddered. The plot that went dead decades ago after you and Romulus busted down the Order's door? We didn't bust it down. And you haven't had any trouble since then, he said, and I didn't want to scare him with all the times I'd felt the necromancer's presence, or how close it had come tonight when I was ensnared by Hank this evening. So, even if Hank knows about supernaturals, Jack continued, does he really look like he would be part of the Order? We both looked to Hank, who sat staring back at us with rapt attention. The only thing that was missing was a bowl of popcorn in his lap. Sarge tilted his head curiously. I'm not, he replied, realizing that was his cue to join the conversation. Well, he might not be, but what about his cousin? Who, Max? Hank asked in disbelief. He's a magician. Works at the Magic Castle sometimes doing card tricks and stuff, though he's really training to be a mage scholar. See, he's training to be a... What now? A mage scholar, Hank replied pleasantly. That sounds pretty hunter-like to me, I replied skeptically. Oh no, Hank popped in. He doesn't want to be a hunter. He has an apprenticeship with another mage. The Order and their hunters are too political. My cousin wants to be an explorer and travel the world. I didn't really want to admit that I didn't know much about mages. I'd read tons of books on vampires, but hadn't gotten into anything on magic users yet. Perhaps Jack was right. Maybe I was being a tad paranoid. I promise I'm not spying or whatever it is you think I'm doing, Hank added. Look, my cousin can't have me stay with him anymore because his training is getting too dangerous. I'm trying to pursue directing, but so far, I can only get PA work, which doesn't pay much. If I can't stay with you guys, I'll have to go back to Louisiana. I can't afford anywhere else out here on my own. Please, please let me stay. I won't ever walk in on your feeding again, I promise. See, he's just a pathetic kid, Jack replied triumphantly. No offense, Hank. None taken, Hank nodded, and turned his big brown puppy dog eyes back on me. I sighed in defeat. I could tell he was telling the truth. Humans got a faintly sour smell when they lied. Right now he just smelled like Slim Jims and boy sweat. I rolled my eyes and sat down. Sarge immediately jumped into Hank's lap and gave him a big slobbery lick. So you and your cousin can do magic? I asked, and then scented the air around Hank curiously. He didn't have that sharp gingery smell that usually accompanied magic. Hank looked a little disheartened then. No, he replied. My father's brother married into it. No magic in my blood, sadly. I looked at him curiously. Wait, what about that electric stone you used? That's just a magic item. Anybody can use those, he sighed. I don't have true magic, just the stuff Max gives me for self-defense. And he can't teach you real magic? Jack asked. You have to have a natural talent for it, he replied. Jack and I sat nodding at him, not sure where to go from there. Hank seemed harmless enough, and truth be told, he was a great gamer buddy. Those were hard to find. Online gamers were either a bunch of 12-year-olds using their parents' credit card to buy every high-powered item they could, or some middle-aged pervert who would befriend me and then start verbally abusing me for not flying out to Arkansas to go on a date with him. Hank was a breath of fresh air. So, are we cool? I asked Hank then. About the whole me being a vampire thing, I clarified. Oh, well, yeah, I mean, you guys are fun to hang out with. As long as I'm not on the menu and you tell me what Jack is, I'd love to stay. I judged that Hank was telling the truth. He really did seem curious. It fit. I'm undead, Jack told Hank then. Hank stared at him. No, really. It's okay, you can tell me. It's not like I would report you to the hunters for telling me. I may be human, but I'm technically in the community. Seriously, Jack replied. I nodded in confirmation. Hank just shook his head. That can't be. You're alive. He only looks alive, I told him. Same thing with Sarge. The dog too? Hank exclaimed. But neither of you are rotting. You speak coherently. You don't amble. If you're zombies, you're pretty bad at it. You don't believe me? Jack asked. I'd sooner believe you were a fairy princess, Hank laughed. Jack looked to me and nodded. I knew what he wanted, and I shook my head no. Pandora, Jack called sternly. I hated when he used my full name. Okay, fine. Jack? Drop dead, I told him. He did. Jack instantly went limp, sliding halfway off his recliner in a dead slump. Hank stared at him a moment, trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke. Sarge sat whimpering next to me. "Check his pulse," I told Hank, motioning to Jack. Hank eyed me skeptically, but went to Jack's side. He placed his fingers to Jack's wrist and waited. He then moved his fingers to another place on Jack's wrist and waited again. "You won't find it," I told him. "Well, I'm no medical professional," Hank continued, moving on to check the pulse at Jack's neck. He waited, and of course found nothing. His eyes widened then, and he looked at me stunned. "You killed him!" "No, I didn't," I replied, and then instantly corrected myself. "Well, I mean I did, but that's a long story. I didn't kill him this time because he's already dead." "Oh my God, Jack," he continued in horror. "Hank, calm down," I told him. "Jack, get up," I said before Hank could get any more worked up, and Jack's eyes opened in a flash. Hank flew across the room in shock as Sarge ran up to slobber all over Jack. "But you were," Hank fumbled. "Dead? I know," Hank replied, pushing Sarge off of him before looking up at Hank apologetically. Hank rushed back to Jack and placed his hand to his neck, nearly pushing Jack off his chair. "You have a pulse again," Hank yelled. "Hank, calm down," I told him. "Geez, you're all right with me being a vampire, but Jack being a zombie gets your underoos in a bunch? I've never seen this. Max is gonna flip when I tell him about you. He loves studying new creatures." "Well, this is fun," Jack said then. "Anyone want to play WoW?" We all considered, looked to one another, and then ran for our various weapons of choice. Hank to his laptop, me to the living room computer with Sarge on my heels, and Jack to the dining room computer. So Hank continued living with us and turned out to be an excellent errand boy for me during the day. It was weird with humans sometimes. Despite my intentions, they, specifically males, almost always seemed compelled to do as I asked. I wasn't even pouring on the pheromones. It just happened. As far as friends went, Hank was pretty much it. Jack had work buddies he would have drinks with, and I chatted with people on set, but we never really made the friendship leap with anyone outside of our own house. Of course, I had Remy, but all Jack had was a string of temporary one-week girlfriends. Jack and I had the same dilemma when meeting people. We couldn't make friends with other supernaturals because they saw us as a threat. We couldn't make friends with humans for too long because they would freak out when they noticed that we didn't age. Lucky for us, our coworkers differed from job to job. This brought me back to my oldest friend, Rosetta. We didn't communicate often. She was in her late 40s now, and though we were the same age, she seemed so much more adult. While I had managed to keep my youthful attitude along with my visage, she had most certainly grown up. Rosetta worked for the county as a secretary, had been divorced for nearly 2 decades, and was a single mother to her now 20-year-old twins, Charlie and Charisse. Despite her dislike for my eternally damned condition, once a year, Rosetta and I got together for dinner and a chat. I was a little leery about this year's meeting. I had been feeling the necromancer's presence more and more lately, and yet every time I tried to track him down, it was like he had never been there. I would think I was imagining it if the feeling wasn't so strong. I wanted to reschedule with Rosetta, just until I had gone a while without the looming presence. But she, for once, insisted that we meet. Usually I was the one who had to remind her of our annual meeting, so I had to go. Unfortunately, her kids still weren't allowed to come. Guess I couldn't blame her. If I had babies, I wouldn't want people around that could potentially drink their blood either. But they were such a big part of her life, and I wasn't anymore. I would have liked to have known them. I could have been Auntie D. Rosetta had been the closest thing I had to family aside from Jack, and he was dead. So I had to respect her wishes, no matter how much I disliked them. "Seriously, Rose, I'm not so different from you," I reminded her as we sat down to dinner. "I'm not just some fiend attacking people in shadowy alleyways. I still breathe the same air. I'm just colder, survive on blood, have super abilities, can bring people back from the dead, and..." Rosetta glared at me. "Okay, yeah, I'm a bit different, but I'm still me." Rosetta just shook her head. "Well, I don't understand any of it. Least of all, how you can spend eternity playing video games and working useless stunt jobs." She sighed at me in disappointment. This was the start of our usual dinner conversation. She didn't much approve of the way I spent my eternal life. I always tried to mentally prepare myself for these speeches, but they always managed to catch me off guard. Rosetta had picked an Italian restaurant for dinner. She still loved herself some pepperoni pizza. At least that hadn't changed. We both knew I wouldn't be eating much, so I'd chosen the most common menu item, spaghetti and meatballs. I picked at the food as I tried to harness my agitation. I was feeling strangely on edge, even more than I usually was at our annual meetings. Then I realized that it was the restaurant. It had a strange scent, something aside from marinara and garlic, which was throwing my senses for a loop. Garlic didn't weaken me by any stretch, not unless it was a concentrated mixture with hemlock and forced into my bloodstream. I still winced at the memory of the horrible dagger those two vampires had shoved in my side. Outside of that extenuating circumstance, I'd have to eat a plateful of raw garlic for it to deter me, and I'm pretty sure that would affect most people negatively. This smell was different. It was a smell I only ever encountered in graveyards, the decaying smell of dried leaves and wet soil. It was the smell of death. It mixed with the garlic, creating an overwhelming odor that was making it hard for me to concentrate on the conversation. I looked around the restaurant suspiciously. I'd been worried ever since that night with Hank. I'd felt the dark presence growing close to me. It hadn't reared its ugly head since, and this smell I was getting wasn't the same as the feeling I had when the presence was near. I was still on edge. "Are you listening to me?" Rosetta asked in annoyance. I snapped to attention. What had we been talking about? Oh yeah, me wasting my eternal life. "Well, what else should I do?" I asked, knowing she had as much clue as I did. "I don't know. Help people with your gifts. You want me to put on spandex and avenge the innocent?" I was all for helping someone out if I happened by them, but I couldn't imagine that trolling alleyways for wrongdoers paid well. I guess I could become a cop, but I doubted there was a nocturnal police academy available. Not to mention, I'd had to wear those uniforms on set before. They're damn uncomfortable. "I want to see you happy, and I don't think you are," Rosetta continued, annoyed that I wasn't taking her seriously. "You should experience the world. Make some real friends." I don't know what friends she wanted me to make when she, my oldest friend, wouldn't see me more than once a year. "Look, I appreciate your concern, but I am happy. Remy's a bit of a challenge sometimes, but he's good." Really good, I thought. Suddenly, embarrassment flooded me then. I'd carnally thought of Remy in front of my friend. She wasn't a mind reader, but she was as good as one sometimes. Luckily, or not so luckily, she decided to stick with the subject at hand. "If I could do half of what you can, you should do more. Something. Anything." "Yeah, maybe I can go back to school," I replied sarcastically. We remember how much fun that was the first time around. "Might not be a bad idea." "Rosetta," I groaned, exasperated. "You know I love you, but it's the same thing every time I see you. You tell me I need to start doing something with my life. I placate you by saying that I'll try. Repeat process next year. Can't we just have a nice dinner together?" Rosetta hung her head a little, looking slightly abashed. I didn't want to make her feel bad. I just wanted to have a nice time with her for once. That's when another strong whiff of the pungent, earthy death smell assaulted me. I nearly cringed. It was then that I realized where the scent was coming from. With wide eyes, I turned to my best friend. The smell was coming from her. It was under the general garlic of the restaurant and the liberal spray of perfume she'd put on, but it was definitely there. My eyes widened a little, and I realized that there might have been a reason Rosetta had been so pushy about meeting with me today. I narrowed my eyes at her. "Is there something you want to tell me?" It was Rosetta's turn to look stunned. "Why would you think that?" She never had been a good liar. "Rose," I said in warning. "Don't take that tone with me, Pandora," she blustered in defense. "Rose!" I nearly shouted at her. "All right, don't be pushy," she shouted back at me, and then sagged a little. "I'm dying." Bomb dropped. I stared at her, trying to figure out what she had just said. She couldn't have said. Then it hit me full on, like a ton of bricks. That smell, the smell of death. I'd known it was coming from her, and yet... Dying? "You're what?" I screamed, rattling all the glassware in the room. I think I took it pretty well. "Would you keep it down?" she hissed. "Your super voice nearly shattered the wine glasses." Rosetta glanced awkwardly at the people who'd turned to find the source of the awful screech. When they settled back into their seats, Rosetta turned back to me, looking all the more annoyed. I was left in stunned silence, staring at my soon-to-be-dead best friend. "Breast cancer," she sighed, moving her hair back an inch so I could see the thin strands beneath her wig. "It's advanced," she continued, pulling it back into place. "I've already told the twins." All I could think to ask was, "How long?" "I found out after our last dinner," she replied, unable to make eye contact. "I would have called you, but I wanted to tell you in person." "How long do you have?" I knew how long she had. I could sense it, but I needed to hear it from her. "I knew you wouldn't take this well. Rosetta!" "Months, 8 at the most." I sat silently staring at my meatball marinara. The doctor had been generous. Now that I was focused fully on her, I could smell the decay, the time she didn't have left. My friend would be dead in less than 6 months. I marveled at my ability to pinpoint it, but I was certain. Something in me just knew. A whole wash of thoughts ran through my mind. True, we weren't super close anymore, but she was still my best friend. My only real friend. One that I had shared all my secrets with, who had known me before I'd become the night stalker sitting before her. The thought of losing her pricked my heart painfully. I thought of asking Remy to find a good doctor for her. I thought of bringing her back from the dead. I thought of jumping over the table right there and turning her into a blood-sucking fiend. She might even forgive me for it someday. "What can I do?" I asked feebly. "Nothing," she replied sternly. "I just thought you should know." "But I have to do something," I pleaded. "What good is bringing back the dead if I can't do it for you?" "Don't," she yelled, stunning me into silence. The restaurant patrons glanced at us again, but quickly went back to their meals. "I don't want to be like you. I don't want to be undead like Jack. I don't want any of it, and I especially don't want it for my children. It's a dangerous world you live in, full of predators. I just want to go in peace, surrounded by my family. If you bring me back from the dead, so help me, Dora, I will never forgive you." I sat bewildered. Apparently, she had given my reaction a lot of thought. "So this is it then? You're just going to tell me you're dying and then walk out of here?" "Essentially, yes." What a friend. "But I also wanted to ask you a favor." Of course she did. I wanted to tell her no, but how could I deny the dying wish of an old friend? How could I not listen? "I want you to look out for the twins." I blinked at her in shock. "What? You don't want me anywhere near them." "I know, but I want you to make sure they're safe," she replied sadly. "Just check in on them every now and again. Please, do this for me." I glared at her. It was so like Rosetta to ask me to do something she had been telling me not to do for years. I should have seen this coming. "Please, Dora," she begged me. "I know I have no right to ask, but I'll be gone soon, and they'll be attending college in your area. You know their father was never around. They won't have anyone after I'm gone." "Well, how am I supposed to look after them? You want me to go up and say, 'Hi, I'm a friend of your dead mother's,' or 'Surprise, I'm your new vampire guardian'?" "They don't have to know you're there," she replied, and I felt another pang in my heart, this time of disappointment. She still didn't want me to talk to them. "You're the vampire," Rosetta laughed grimly. "I'm sure you'll find a way." "Fine, but I'm not babysitting," I replied. "I'm just checking in on them once in a while to make sure things are all right." Tears filled Rosetta's eyes. "Thank you." She smiled weakly. "Yeah, no problem," I muttered, hardly able to look at her. It occurred to me then just how hard this must be for her. My death had been so quick I hadn't had time to really think about it before it happened. It must be torture to know that you would die in less than a year. You'd spend the whole time dreading the day. Like Rosetta was. "Now quit with the waterworks. If this is our last dinner together, we should make the best of it." The rest of our meal passed without mention of vampires or cancer. We just reminisced about the past and enjoyed the time we had. At the end, I carefully hugged her, scolded her for not telling me about her condition sooner, and then renewed my promise to look out for her children. Rosetta didn't want me at her deathbed. She said she didn't want me to see her like that, to remember her as a feeble cancer patient. She knew better. When I arrived that night, I knew she did. She could feel her death coming as much as I had. 6 months, almost to the day, I had felt her dying, just like I had my mother. Remy didn't even argue when I told him I was going to San Diego and that I wasn't taking the car. I looked in through her window like a proper stalker and watched. Rosetta lay in her bed with the twins and an at-home nurse by her side. I marveled once more at her children and how they had her features, but none of her coloring. It was their eyes that startled me the most, with their blue-violet color. It had to have been one of their father's attributes. I realized then why Rosetta didn't want me to see her. It was an image I wouldn't soon forget. Her hair was gone except for a few fragile strands. Her cheeks were gaunt, her hands frail, and her skin was so thin I could practically see the blood struggling to circulate beneath it. The smell of death was so potent now I could hardly stand it. Rosetta already had one foot in the grave. I watched from outside as she began to slip away. Rosetta looked to her children with tears in her eyes. Then, to my amazement, she turned and looked out the window, as though she could see me, clear as day. A smile formed on her thin, pale lips, and she closed her eyes. It was like watching someone fall off a cliff. Like she'd just let go, falling into a void beyond sight, beyond reach. I wanted to tell Rosetta to get up, to come back, but I couldn't do that. She would get up, and she would feel better, but that was not what she wanted. In this moment, I finally realized that Rosetta was right, about everything. She had been pleading for me to stop wasting my life because that's how she felt about hers. I'd felt it in her death, the hope for something better in the afterlife, the longing for her suffering to end. Her children had been her only true joy. Rosetta's parents had died early. Her boyfriend got her pregnant, married her in Vegas, and then disappeared. She hated her job and never got to see much of the world except for a few trips to relatives on the East Coast. Rosetta wanted me to do what she couldn't. I was sad that it took her death to make me realize that I should get out and live.